Hello everybody, Bruce here with a video to review a program that's introduced in chapter 1 in the textbook called Chaos. And while I'm not going to ask you to understand specifically what mathematically is happening in the program, I just want to go through the program and show you how it's structured and stuff like that. So I downloaded the file already from Canvas and I stuck it on my desktop. And what I'm going to do is I'm on a Mac. It's the same thing on a PC. I'm just going to drag the file over into Visual Studio Code, right? And you can see here it opened it up. And since I can't see that well, I made the type ginormous, right? So what I'm going to do here is go through the program with you. And I have the sidebar here turned off. My mouse is in the upper left-hand corner. And I didn't open a folder, but I should have, but we won't talk about that right now. So let's take a look at the Chaos program. And what you'll notice in the editor here, in the Visual Studio Code editor, is that all of the lines, right, are numbered, right, 1 through 11, right? This is called the gutter, by the way, the gutter, all right? And all the line numbers are numbered, and in programming, we call each line a statement, And the first two lines of the Chaos program are what we call comments, and they begin with this hash sign. Or, yeah, you know it when you like add a hashtag to like a social media post and things like that, right? So what these hash signs do in a programming statement is they tell Python that, hey, ignore these. They're just for humans. Okay? They're there for someone who's reading the program or talking about it in a movie like Bruce is right now, like I am right now, right? That the file is called chaos.py and it gives a description, a simple program illustrating chaotic behavior, right? And again, these two are right here at the top, and you typically add comments to your code to help you remember why you did certain things certain ways, as well as maybe somebody else who may inherit your code or work on the code with you. Because a lot of times, you know, you'll make decisions when you write things that you may need to describe to others what's going on, all right? So what's going on here on line 4 is we are defining a new piece of functionality inside of our program, this Chaos program, and we're giving it the name main, and we're saying, hey, define this function called main and ignore these parentheses right now, right? Whoops. And then this colon here, all right? Now, Python is space sensitive, and what that means is, you see how the code is indented here on line numbers 5 through 9? You see how it's indented? Because what this is saying is like, these statements here belong to this new function, this new piece of functionality we are creating called main. So the indentation in Python is key to everything that you're going to program in this class, all right? So again, let's not get too much into it, but the first line of the function says to print out the stuff that's between these quotes here, these double quotes. And they could either be single quotes or double quotes as long as they match, all right? And what I would say to you is make sure that you're always consistent, right? So you see here we have single quotes, and on the next line we got these double quotes, right? So let's just put them back here to double quotes, right? So what this is saying is, hey, print out this program illustrates a chaotic function. So when we run this program, it's gonna print out to what we call the terminal or console this string of text. This string, this program illustrates a chaotic function. That's a string of characters, right? It's a programming term, all right? So hold on to that. So it's going to print it out to the console, right? So after it executes this statement, it's going to move on to the next statement. It's going to say, and by the way, anytime you see like an equal sign here, we're always going to read from the right to the left, okay? So what this is saying is, and we're going to go from the inside out, here's another function. And by the way, print is a built-in function. It's built-in functionality within Python. There's like the people who wrote Python, the programming language, defined, right, the print function. Now, this thing main here, we are defining that ourselves. That's a name that we're giving it, all right? So print is built into Python, and it displays information out to the user, right? So on this next one, right, we are asking the user for input, and it's saying enter a number between 0 and 1, okay? Now, by default, and you'll see this in another video, right? Input, when we ask a user for input, a person, I hate to use the word user, but when we ask a person, right, who's running our program to enter a number between 0 and 1, by default, it's going to come back as a string, like if we enter like 0.5, it's going to come back as quote 0.5 quote, which is a string. So what this evaluate thing does here, this eval, another built-in piece of functionality in the programming language, it says, hey, take that string that Joe entered in, which was 0.5, and evaluate it, which forces it to become a number. And tell this variable x to hold on to that. Okay, so when Joe or Jody or Roger, right, enters in some information, we're telling our program, hey, store whatever they entered in this thing called x, right? I know it's math and everyone's like, oh my gosh, right? But just bear with me, right? So x, right, holds on to that value for the life of this function here, right? So what happens next is this is called a loop, and it's saying perform something 10 times. It's going to loop around, jump around, actually not jump around, but loop around, execute any of the program code that's indented below it 10 times. And this statement here for I in range of 10 says, hey, for the range of numbers, right, from 0 to 9, which is 10 numbers, during each iteration of the loop, every time this thing loops around, assign this other variable, kind of like x, the value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is actually 10 times. So check this out. Now what's happening here, again, we read right to left, is we are performing a mathematical calculation using the value of x that was entered above. And we are performing a calculation here. Actually, we're using x again here. And we are reassigning the value of x to a new value. And in programming, things like x and I, these are called variables. They hold on to information, but they can vary, right? What I mean by that is they can change the information that is being stored. So that's why they're called a variable. So if x is initially 0.5 and this calculation gets performed, we're actually going to reassign the new number that this thing calculates on line number 8 to that new value for x, okay? And then on the next line, we are printing out the value of x, okay? So remember, anytime you see this colon here, right, colon, the information below it is immediately indented, and this is the beginning of what we call a counted loop. It's going to do something 10 times, and this code that's indented gets run every time this thing loops around, all right? And then it's only when we say, hey, main, that we defined up here on line 4, it's only when we call its name, we say, hey, main, I want you to run now. So if I put this in front of it, this hash, whoops, if I put this hash sign in front of it, it's a comment. That means, hey, human, This stuff is for you. And while this stuff here gets defined, it's not going to run because we're not calling, right, here, the function that we defined. But when we call this thing that we defined up here on line 4, it's going to run. It's going to do its thing. All right. So check this out. Right click, run Python file in terminal. Here we go. And notice here it's asking me for input. I had a click in there and I'll enter 0.3. And notice, right, let me bring up this little window here. This is the terminal inside of Visual Studio Code. So you can scroll. I'm scrolling with my mouse wheel, right? There is the 0.3 that I entered, and it's printing out over and over again the value of x as it changes, right? 10 times. Now, to make this a little bit clearer, what I can do here is I can say, hey, print out the value of I, comma, and then print out the value of x. So run Python file in terminal. I'll enter another number, 0.2. And now you can see the output has changed a little bit. Here is 0, and that's the first value of x that got printed out. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And notice, 0 through 9 is 10 iterations. I know that's weird. I know that sounds like, what? So counting, when you have a loop, this thing in code that does something over and over again, a specific number of times, which is very common in programming, right? I'm just printing out it's like if I was running around my block in my neighborhood and I asked my wife, Gail, that every time, right, I run around the block, I want you to count how many times, but I want you to start counting at 0 instead of 1, right? Every time I looped around, right, the block and passed all these, all these, different homes and whatever, right? That's this stuff, right? It's going to print out that loop iteration value, right? So that's what this little chaos program is trying to show you, right? It is trying to show you that this is a chaotic math function here, but I don't want to get into that right now because we're just learning how to program right now. And Bruce, totally me, I just threw a lot of terminology at you, right? I talked about comments here on lines 1 and 2 for humans only. I taught you how that the print function is built into the Python language. Input is built into the language. Eval is built into the language. This construct right here is built into the language. It's like part of, like if you went to go buy a Lego set, right? These pieces here, print, eval, input, for and range, right, and print, they're part of, they're like the Lego bricks, right? But we defined here on line 5 our own functionality. Like, check this out. If I call this Roger, and I change this name to Roger right here, because I can, right? It's just a name, right? And if I try to right-click and run Python file in terminal, it's still going to run because I just defined the name of this bit of code to Roger rather than main, right? I can't rename print, by the way, because that's built in. The creators of Python name that particular bit of functionality print, and I can use it to print out information. Now, the other thing that I mentioned was indentation. That if I took this code right here and I outdented it like that, it's not going to run. It's gonna barf. It's watch this. I'm going to save it, right? Whoops. And notice what it did. It tried to format it for me when I saved it. So it's not going to run. Actually, let me just show you here. Right? We get errors, right? We get tons of errors here in the terminal because something's wrong, right? Because this code, right? This code, and you can see this squiggly, this red line here, right? It's telling you that something's wrong. So I'm going to put it back, and I'm going to put it right there. And notice now that we don't have any more red squiggly lines because this code here is part of this function, okay? And same thing here. Right? If I say that here's this loop, this thing that I want to do, in this case 10 times over and over again, right? It's not gonna run it, right? Check it out. It's not gonna run it, right? So look, it gives me an error right here. It's telling you what's kind of wrong to the best of its ability. So this code, right, needs to be indented. And again, anytime you have a colon at the end here, right, or a loop structure, right, you're going to have, anytime you see a colon there, you're going to have the stuff below it indented, all right? Now, I know it's week 1, module 1, and I just threw a ton at you. This is a very basic, program, all right, that's going to just show you how certain things work. Now, just to show you one more thing here, if I just delete all this code out, I highlighted all the stuff here, and I just say print hello world, right? And I run it, you can see it just prints out hello world, right? And my code is not indented because it's not part of something, it's not part of something I'm defining as a reusable piece of code, right? Same thing with the loop. For I in range of 10, right? If I say here print the current loop iteration is, right? And I put I, right? And I run it, right? Notice how it's telling me that it's on iteration 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So I could put this code now into a function, and I'll call it Fred, right? There it is. Now, what did Bruce say? He said, hey, when you see a colon, all the code below it that needs to be part of this functionality, right? I'm indenting it, and there we go. And in order, I defined Fred, but if I want to now run this code, I need to say, hey, Fred, with the parentheses, go run. And when I run this now, right, it does the same thing as we did before. But I could do this. I can say, Fred, right? I can run this code, right, over and over again. So I'm going to run this block of code here 3 times. So watch this. So if I scroll up, notice it's ran it 3 times. And that's something we do in programming a lot. If we find ourselves repeating information over and over again, right, we tend to take that code that we find ourselves writing over and over again, and we place it in a function, a piece of functionality that we declared ourselves. All right, I know, it's a lot, and I'm here to help. Don't worry. But there you go. I just wanted to. I'm just undoing all the stuff I did here. Just to show you that I can undo almost everything I did and go back to the code I had before. And the last thing I want to show you is, notice in this tab in Visual Studio Code, it's a white dot. It's a dot. And what that means is, hey, you haven't saved that code. So now if I save it, right, file save, or you can use a keyboard shortcut, notice it's an X now, and that means it's saved. And that means when you run it, it's going to run this particular code. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, please ask them on the Slack questions channel. Have a great day, everybody.